in the UIA, we only work with some of the best people. And while working with the Gates Scaling Partners Network, who you've met a couple other of folks that in the last week from, because of that network, we're able to see who's really on the cutting edge of most of the provocative and important conversations in higher ed. So as a result, I have gotten to know Dr. Amelia Parnell from NASPA, who's the Vice President for Research and Policy for NASPA, but also does, as I would describe, all the things. And so today what we're going to talk about is, first you're going to learn a little bit about NASPA. We're going to probably have a little conversation about, a tiny bit about advising, because I have a feeling we might have that in common. But I also just want to get your sense about research and policy, and especially because you sit in Washington, D.C. So the first question I wanted to ask is, okay, so people who don't know what NASPA is.
What is NASPA? Yeah, I'll give you the stranger next to you answer, the one if you're in a car or plane, something like that. Usually I start off by saying, they'll say, where do you work? And I'll say, do you know somebody who's gone to college? And they might say, yes, I did, or yes, my neighbor did, or my son or daughter. And usually I would say from there, it's not uncommon for a college campus to have a residence hall, some place where students live and go to campus. Or they may go and visit a health and wellness center. And they'll say, okay, yeah, I've heard of that. And I'll say there are a lot of functions on a campus that interact with students. And the people who work in those functions are student affairs professionals. And I then say, if they're still with me, I work for a nonprofit that helps those professionals do their job. So we inform them about a lot of things. So say, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And then we get into another conversation. So in essence, for those in higher ed land, we are a membership association, which basically means our membership base are people who work on college campuses, specifically in roles that interact with students directly. So health and well-being, clubs and activities, all sorts of things. And so we've got about 16,000 of those such roles, people who join NASPA across the country and in several other countries as well.
Okay, so NASPA, the student affairs I was familiar with because, as a student leader, that was the most friendly part of the institution from my perspective. And so I became most familiar with the area, but over time, my perspective where I sit has changed. And my observation is that the student affairs portfolio only continues to grow with time, that all the urgency, especially around mental health, and a lot of the challenges that people are hearing about that are really affecting just the entire ecosystem seem to sit in the domain of the folks that you serve. Is there a sense of exhaustion? Are people noticing it, or is it just like the normal thing in higher ed where we're constantly just piling on and we're just used to it?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything that you just mentioned. I think if you were to ask a student affairs professional, regardless of if they're early in their career or all the way up to the vice president role, several of them will say, hey, our portfolios are expanding. We're doing a whole lot more things. But I think they're also saying that they see more connection to other functions. So there's a huge movement now about integrated learning or hybrid learning. So new relationships between student affairs and academic affairs, for example. There's a lot of emerging conversation about the business office. So as soon as we start talking about issues of food insecurity, what does the business office need to know when trying to help support a new food pantry or something of that sort? So I think the portfolios are definitely expanding so that depth is there, but that width is there as well. So you're seeing much more partnership across the campus. And I don't think that student affairs would ever have been able to manage all this alone. So I think there's a little bit of sympathy or empathy among colleagues, but yeah, it's a lot going on and it has been for a while.
So because you sit in DC and your experience is, and your dominion includes federal policy and research, I'm sure this conversation is coming up. I don't know. Have you already testified in Congress? You see?
No.
Okay. Well,
I've not gotten an invitation yet. You know somebody?
But I'm curious about, as members of Congress are hearing more about this, that if they reach out to NASPA, what is the carrot or stick they would ever be able to control in this space? I feel like if a member of Congress asked me what they could do about mental health, I would just be as always, it's all the pressures and problems that prevent professionals from actually being able to work on this. But it's a whole thing, and try not to be punitive and give us a chance to actually figure this out. Mm-hmm. Or are there actual carrots and sticks?
Yeah, I mean, the carrot is that if any legislator at any level, so it's not just federal but state as well, if any of them said, hey, we really want to help, what is it that we can do? I think their role is what's most important. I think they can do a couple things. One is, of course, hold the megaphone. If they're thinking about proposed legislation, they have to of course, seek back input from those who are closest to the action, and then take that and actually put that in, conversations about things they're deliberating on. So I wouldn't expect a policymaker to have the depth of knowledge that campus professionals do, but I also wouldn't expect them to start making legislative decisions without that level of information. So I think, given the pace of politics and everything, it seems to be so fast, I know it's tempting to just say, hey, I heard this really great story, I'm going to now enact this new legislation. That would be my caution to them. I'd say the best thing they can do is actually reach back into the communities, that are reaching out to them and say, hey, let's have a conversation with a relevant level of managing expectations. They won't promise us everything and we won't expect everything, but I think that conversation has to continue to happen. I think if we got the call to say, hey, so-and-so wants to meet with you, I think we bring a lot of information. If they got the call, I want them to answer the phone.
Because when in my doc study program, part of what I worked on was academic advising, and I was at Vanderbilt where they had faculty advisors, and in my world, that's very unusual because it's a real job.
Yeah.
We can't possibly expect that people who also do all these other things, it's a hat. But in the conversations with them, this was the thing that came up, is that faculty members were like, I am woefully inadequately equipped.
Yeah.
And there's no way that I can hear the things that I'm hearing from these students who I'm trying to help out, and also then just pivot and go back to my research and go back to building building the syllabus for the next class. Like, these are things you cannot leave behind, and I don't have any tools. So the conversation, I agree. Like, there's not a silver bullet, there's not a solution, but it's more just, I want to make sure that you're not experiencing like massive pressure from policymakers to like have solved it. And, and punitive measures are the way to go.
Yeah, I think with regard to advising, it's tempting to look for that one model, that's with any other thing. But campus context matters a lot. I think advising, the function itself, is really there to provide advice to the student. And so sometimes it will be academic in nature, what classes, what major, things like that. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's career. I think for faculty members who are feeling the pressure of like, hey, this is way outside, I don't know what to tell a student who has an issue that's not academic related or not even discipline or field related. Where do I send them? What do I do? In the same vein, professional advisors may have difficulty advising a student at the level of specificity about what they can expect in a certain career when that's not their desired, or that's not their background, their expertise. I think we hear a lot more about this integrated notion, much like the learning component, integrated, holistic advising, something like that. So everybody has a piece to play, and depending on the campus context, some campuses will say it's important for a first-year student, for example, to get advising from multiple places, whereas those who are later in their career, they know where they're going, they're about to be finished, they need to have that advising at a much more, deep level. So I would say that if there's any pressure, it's the pressure to find what works really quickly, and we don't ever usually respond to anything quickly, and that's probably for good reason. Policymakers, I think, they see the headlines, they see the students who are leaving with large amounts of debt, or they see the students who have to go back and retool, and they want to know like what type of things can we be doing to prevent those. There are a lot of factors that go into it. So really good question though.
I mean, one of the things that's very clear is that there are things that are bubbling up in higher ed that are actually problems with all of society. And because higher ed is in a position that is, experiencing extra criticism right now, and it's in a position that's getting, especially with this whole admission scandal and stuff, there's a little bit more heightened scrutiny. And as a result, like somehow there's this expectation that higher ed will have solved a problem that the rest of society we have not figured out. And that somehow we are only responsible for it. So, okay, that's super helpful. I do want to get into just some rapid fire.
I'm ready.
So what's something that, because I really believe that my observation of working with you is like every single conversation, like what's going on. So I feel like you have fingers in all the pots of and so what is something, because you have a vast and varied portfolio, like what's something that you've learned lately that's super interesting to you from your work?
I've learned about the nuance and importance of strategic enrollment management. And so within student affairs, some divisions have enrollment management as a part of that, others do not. But when you think about the formal term is constructing a class of students, so figuring out who you're going to offer admission to, who's going to be coming, I've learned a lot more lately about the intersection between financial aid, the admissions office, the registrar, student affairs, and how that mix of roles is so important. So it's not just let's admit Bridget Burns to the campus, to NASPA University, welcome, to the campus. We have to be thinking really, really early on about what types of additional support that student would need, what types of coaching they might need, what types of financial resources or financial aid packaging. And it truly feels like you're setting the stage for the fullness of the experience. And I didn't realize exactly how important that is, because just getting them in, of course, that part we knew, not just getting them in is not enough, but just truly the level of thought and planning that campuses do to make sure that experience can be as good as it possibly can be. I've been learning a lot about that lately.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and it's a super topical thing, and I know quite a few people who are writing books about that right now.
Yeah,
Jeff Salio should be probably watching this because I think he's right. He's squirreled away right now. We're
I
right.
hope he is.
Okay, so that's super helpful to think about the connection there, because I know that there are other associations that are
ACRO is a big one. They do a lot with that.
Their conference soon, and so it's interesting that of course in student affairs you wouldn't have to know that, and it's super interesting as well that like there's separation, because I think of student affairs as having like the ultimate expertise about the student, but if there's a completely different division of the institution that's deciding who the student is and how it's performed, and who the other students are, because we know that the class that we created really does affect the students. So that's interesting. So if you had a magic wand and you could change someone's opinion or someone's view, whose opinion would you change based on your work, and what would be the view that you want to change?
Ooh, and I knew that question was coming. So if I had a magic wand, I would wave it toward anyone who has a perception of what it means to be a successful college student. And I'm going to use my perception that most people talk about student success in the aspect of graduation or retention or persistence. I would wave the wand so that it kind of moves that to the side, doesn't eliminate it, but introduces a new perspective that hits on a couple things that oftentimes are not led with the way that retention and graduation are. The first is the importance of students being able to see an integration of their learning. I think a successful student is one who can pick up all the different places where they might have learned something. And they're not leading with, I need to get a degree, but instead, I need to learn about as much as possible. I need to be able to connect my ability to critically think and communicate. And wherever that can happen for me, in the classroom, outside the classroom, I'm looking for it. I want to seek that. I would love to see people talk about the integrated nature of learning as a success outcome. I would also like to see people talking about health and wellness. I think a successful student, of course, should be stable financially and academically, but I think mental health, physical health, spiritual health, just intellectual health, I think any aspect of sleep and adequate stress management, and things like that, I think a successful student will pick those habits up and it will stay with them even past graduation, because we find that a lot of adults, even those who go into student affairs, still struggle with health and wellness and making that a priority. So those would be the two things. One, the integrated nature of their learning and their constant focus on health and well-being. I think those would be two fantastic indicators of success. They're harder to measure than graduation and retention, and I talked about the same way. But I think if we look at reasons why students don't complete, those two things are definitely levers.
Okay, that's a perfect transition then. I am always fascinated by how people actually get these crazy jobs done, like these massive. Like my observation is that the work never goes down, and you're always needed to, add more. And the volume of email and travel, which I know you do a lot, like survival. I'm always curious about that. So my question is, like, do you have any tips that have helped you get through the day and feel productive, or like that really has helped you kind of level up in terms of in the face of the unending additional work coming your way?
From a practical standpoint, I'm definitely a proponent of a to-do list, and I've tried to implement a strategy that if I have a to-do list, it can't be more than 5 things. Because if I put more than 5, the likelihood of doing that in the middle of all of my meetings and things like that, something will not get done. I think the mental aspect of like, oh man, I still got something else I got to carry into the next day. Just making a call really early and saying, hey, I can't do more than 5 things, and whatever didn't make this 5 gets to the next 5 things. I've been doing that for a while, and it actually helps a lot. On just a cheesy standpoint, if you were to see behind me or to the side here, I have a whiteboard and I put cheesy puns on it every week. On Mondays, I change the pun. So even if I'm out of town, I'll change it so that whoever's in the office can come by and see it. And it's really my reminder to just look up and take a minute to just chuckle a little bit. And they are the corniest. I mean, they're the worst of the worst. Just
What's
because.
Nice?
Knock knock.
Knock knock. What? Who's there?
Yeah.
Yahoo.
No thanks. I use Google.
Oh, that's good. All right. Okay, so my question about your to-do list, though, is do you start your to-do list before you open your inbox in the morning, or do you do it after? And then when do you check it? Do you check back in after you leave the office or right before?
It's actually less about when I open the inbox. It's more about the balance of the types of to-do things. So I can't put like to do, write a chapter of a book and then also meet with so-and-so and write so-and-so. So I usually set them up at the end of the workday. So whatever I'm thinking about that needs to be done for the next day, I'll look at the calendar and then I'll look for small pockets of time. So if I have an hour free, I'll put one of the 5 things as something I can do in about 30 minutes. So I really let the calendar drive what the 5 things are because most times the calendar is pretty full. So in terms of actuality, I do it at the end of the day to prepare
Mhm.
for the next day. So it's
Okay,
almost like a trick answer.
that's smart. Okay, cool. And last, do you have any travel tips that help you survive on the road? Anything that has been
Oh,
the key for you?
yeah, headphones, which can be the best and worst thing. They look like blockers. If you have them in, it looks like I'm unapproachable, but it's actually a great way for me to keep, kind of calm about me. I like a good podcast. I love music, and so when I'm in airports and I'm trying to move from here to there, the headphones provide a nice distraction. So I try to take them out when I do sit on a plane, so the person next to me immediately doesn't think like, oh, don't bother her. But then once the plane takes off, I put them back in, and I'm in a
Are
wonderful
you talking
safe
about
place.
AirPods or the Bose like over the years?
I have not moved to Bose, although I've heard that it's really great. For me, it's more about having a connection to something other than just, the mundane. So
Yeah.
I will admit, complete silence would be the preference, but I don't mind a pair of just regular pods for now.
I'm telling you, the noise canceling ones, they're a game changer for me. And I actually, most of my really productive focus work, I just put the noise canceling on. I don't have any sound coming on.
Yeah.
But here's the tip: if you buy them, because they're like $300, buy them at Nordstrom
Okay.
or buy them at Costco. Those are the two places that you can return them if they
Oh, okay.
on the warranty. Because otherwise, it's a huge investment. And then after like a year, if something goes wrong,
Ah, yeah.
Nordstrom or Costco. So that's your hot tip.
No,
Um,
I appreciate it. I never would have thought either of those would have had Bose headphones.
oh yeah. And then what's your favorite podcast right now that you said that you're listening to?
Um, it's revisionist history. Have you heard of it?
So good, yeah.
Yeah. I listened to the episode with Malcolm Gladwell and Adam Grant.
Oh,
Have you
yeah.
heard that one?
Super good. Yes, we actually just downloaded a few of those, and and Malcolm Gladwell is he's just such a great storyteller.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Good.
I really want to listen to Here to Slay, which is Tressie McMillan Cotton and Roxanne Gay.
Okay, wait. I'll have to watch. I was about to write it down, but I'll watch the recording.
But the problem is I can't figure out what platform it's on because it's not on the normal podcast app that I've looked for. So, but they are legit.
Well, maybe they'll watch this and feel inspired to, Small fact, before I got into, actually even during higher ed, I was many years ago working on the dissertation phase. I wanted to get into music engineering or music production. So I bought the software to do my own home beats and stuff. So I actually do have a good pair of high quality headphones, but I'm too nervous to travel with them because I'm nervous I'll leave them somewhere. But yeah, it takes a lot of work to put together a highly
You're making me think that if we do a Scaling Partners podcast that now that I know that.
Maybe. Remember now, I didn't say I was one of those ones who do it as good as the ones you just mentioned. I know what not so good sounds like because I produce some stuff that.
We're going to need somebody to be a champion for the acoustics, all right?
That's true. That is true. Well, sign me up.
Well, thank you so much for being here today on our live television show on the internet. So super excited. Folks who want to find Amelia Parnell and at NASPA, where can they go to connect with you or with NASPA and learn more?
Yeah. If you want to learn more about NASPA, you can go to NASPA.org. It's a huge website to learn more about the programs we offer, some of the in-person events we do, some of the report stuff that we lead, policy stuff. If you want to find me, I'm a little bit harder to find. I'm not as active on social media, but I am on Twitter. So at Amelia Parnell, you can find me there, or you can just write me, aparnell@naspa.org. I always respond and like to meet new people.